Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first meeting of the Internet Linux Users Group. I am the creator of the group and today's speaker, Vincent Maggard. Thank you very much for joining us for today's, I would like to say, uneventful speaking event, but we had some technical difficulties at the beginning here trying to get the broadcast started. We had a couple issues, so I apologize for us being a little late. Anyway, so it's time to begin our talk. So the first thing I'm going to do, as I do with every meeting, which I will be hosting, is I'm going to go ahead and kind of give you the elevator speech of what this is. This is the Internet Linux User Group. The idea of this is a users group for everyone on the internet to be able to come that uses Linux and is Linux fans to be able to come here and communicate once a week over different topics. We will have guest speakers in every single meeting. I'm the first guest speaker. I will be doing guest speaking occasionally, even though I guess that wouldn't be guest speaking if I'm doing it. I guess that would be creator speaking, but we're going to just keep calling it guest speaking. And then, at least for the moment, and then starting next week, we actually have guest speakers that are not me. So if you don't like to hear my voice, no problem. Starting next week, that's not required, at least not for the bulk of the talks. So today I'm here with my friend, Mr. Trevor Warren. Trevor, feel free to introduce yourself here.
How's it going?
And so that right there is the wonderful Trevor Warren from Canada. And I'm also from the US, from the States. And so today we're going to be talking about the basics of Python programming, particularly as it applies to the Linux ecosystem more than anything else. And so without further ado, I say we get into it. So let's talk about programming. Well, I don't know how many programmers we have in the audience today, but if you aren't a programmer, then this is going to be relatively new to you, but let's get going. Hopefully you'll learn something. So let's talk about some of the really basic stuff. So what's a comment? What's a variable? These are words we're going to toss out a lot in the programming world. A comment, put bluntly and simply, is it's a way of making notes in your code or to temporarily discard code in a particular piece of code. So for example, if you had a particular part of the code that does something, say gets the current time, you might put a comment above that that says, use this to get the current time, right? So that way that when somebody else is looking through your code, or even just you 6 months or a year later and you don't remember what that does, you can look and say, oh, it says you can use this to get the code, right? You can use this method or this function, depending on where it's at in the code, to perform this particular action. And that can be quite useful. It also can be good for troubleshooting because you can remove code that's causing issues. So if you have something that's complaining of a syntax issue, for example, you can put a comment in front of that line of code and see if it stops complaining. And if it does, then you know that there's something wrong in that particular piece of code. The reason I say that is because a lot of times the syntax error is actually on a different line than the one it complains about, or at least that's been my experience. That's something that you'll deal with a lot in PHP, not as much in Python. And then what's variables? A variable is a way to store data in RAM generally and then use it in multiple places in the code. So for example, you might have a variable for somebody's name and you get their name from the input box. And then what you do is, or an input entry, and then what you do is you store that in a variable, and then you can, I would just say store it in the variable name unless you have a reason to store it in something else. And then what you do, you could call that variable anywhere else that you wanted in that section of code, or depending on how your code's written, if it's a global variable, the whole thing, and you'd be able to call that variable and get its contents. So for example, I could go print name, and then I'd print back whatever the name was. And so that could be useful to be like, hello name, and then you get hello Vincent, or hello Trevor, or hello Bob, or hello Sally, regardless of the name. So let's see a little bit of this in action, shall we? So here's our demo. I worked on this demo a little bit earlier, so I'm going to show you multi-line and single-line comments and also how to use variables all in this one demo. And so as you can see, if you take a look at the very top here in the corner, you can see where it says this is a test. At the very top there, the first one that says this is a test, that is considered a multi-line comment. The way you do that in Python is you do 3 quotation marks, the 3 little quote marks there. Then you do however many lines of comments you need, and then you do 3 more to close it. And if you want to do a single line comment, that's also easy in Python. You just use the hashtag or the pound sign, depending on what you want to call that. And then as far as setting the variable here in this example, you can see I made a variable called variable_1. And then it's set equal to test string. Now, strings in programming, we're not going to talk about much today, but just to give you the elevator speech. A string is text, effectively. It's everything that's in those quote marks being set to that variable. And Python, because it's dynamically typed, I didn't have to define it as a string. Okay, let's actually see what that does when it runs. In theory, none of this is a test stuff should give us any errors, even though it's not valid Python code. And then variable 1 here should be printed out by the print variable 1. So variable 1 in the print statement should be replaced with text string. So let's check that out. And what do you know? It worked perfectly. Once we run that code, you can see that successfully we got the result we were expecting. No errors for the stuff that was not Python code that was in the comments, both the multi-line and the single-line comment, and we got our output from the variable in our print statement instead of the word that the variable was called. So pretty simple stuff. Trevor, making any sense to you?
Yeah, it's making sense.
That's
Sorta.
good. Trevor's not a programmer, so of course I had to bring a non-programmer on to talk with me. Trevor's a big fan of Linux. I figured we should get him on here. So, and then he can kind of speak for the audience a little bit, was kind of my thinking. Now, let's talk about while loops, another common thing you're going to see. So what's a while loop? Well, what a while loop is quite bluntly, it's a loop that will run as long as a condition is active. So conditions in Python, that is not something we're going to be talking about as much today. But, well, we are kind of in this while loop context. But what a condition is basically, it is basically you're checking to see if something is equal to something, not equal to something, greater than something, less than something, less than or equal to, etc., that kind of thing. And basically, so you're just checking different operations on different things to see if they're valid. And you're going to see that here in our while loop. So if we look at the while loop here, you can see an example of a condition. And apparently, hold on. Okay, that's better. I put the slides backwards. I'm sorry, everybody. We'll go back to that one you just seen in a minute. But so if you take a look here, the while part here in the top, where it says while 0 equals 0, that's the condition, is 0 equals 0. The double equal sign in Python is saying equal to. The reason that that is the case is because if you use one equal sign in Python, it means you're setting a variable. So in our case, we need to use two equal signs to say while 0 equals 0. Now, this is an example of an infinite loop. An infinite loop will run forever. So then you've also got the option to use a non-infinite loop. A non-infinite loop, or just a regular while loop, what that is it is a loop that will check a condition and eventually stop running. But obviously, while 0 equals 0 will run forever. So if we go back, you can see this was an example of the other screen I showed you. This is an example of a while loop that is showing numbers being printed out. And what it is, it's a while loop that's checking while that the variable number, which starts at 0, is not equal to 21. And as you can see, it stops there at 20. The other thing you got to remember about conditions is when you're counting numbers, you always want to go one number up from what it is, because we start counting in Python and most programming languages at 0, not at 1. And therefore, that would throw you off if you didn't know that. So that's how we get that result. That's an example of a non-infinite while loop. You can see it runs and then it stops. This is an example of an infinite while loop running. You can see it says running, 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 and it's continuously printing running. It's a screenshot, so you guys can't tell that, but it is continuously printing running. So let's talk about for loops. What's a for loop? Well, a for loop, quite frankly, is pretty simple as well. A for loop is a way to cycle through multiple items in a very efficient and easy way. So cycling through those those for loops, the way you do it is you're generally cycling through a list of items. So in Python, we've got dictionaries, we've got lists, and these are different ways of storing stuff. And in my example, I'm showing cycling through a list of items, as this is, I would say, the most common thing you would use a for statement for, is to cycle through a list of items. So you might, for example, have a list of multiple names, and then you cycle through that list to print out each person's names. Or each person's name, sorry. So if we take a look at our demo for this, you can see this is some example code to do that. So if you take a look at the top here, where it says test_list equals, and then you have the little brackets, and then the quote marks, and then commas and different strings here, those are each an item. So item 1 is an item, Item 2 is another item. Item 3 is another item. And item 4 is another item in the list that I created, which is called test_list. Then we are building a for statement here to cycle through that and print out each of those items. And what we're doing here is we're going for item in test_list. And then we're printing out we are on item. And then we're doing a space in the string there, and then a plus sign, and then item, which is the variable for that particular item. And that variable will change each time the for statement cycles through. So just to talk a little bit about concatenating variables in Python, there's multiple ways to do it. I think the most readable way is to use the plus sign. There is several other ways to do it, but that's just a little side note of this. Now, I should point out that if you were doing this with numbers like we was in one of the while loops earlier, you would actually need to convert that to a string by putting it in the function str open close parentheses. But in our particular case, they were already strings. So concatenating two strings together or putting two strings together is very easy. Concatenating in the programming world is just taking two strings or two things and putting them together. That's all it really is. It's just adding them together. So Trevor, is any of this stuff making any sense to you? I'm curious as a non-programmer if this stuff is actually intuitive to you or if it doesn't make any sense.
It is pretty educational. I think I'll learn it after a while. It is pretty easy. It's not like, all the different codes and stuff people talk about. It's normal. Like you're talking English.
Well, that's the goal. I'm trying to speak programmer to English. I'm trying to translate here. So I hope that I'm doing quite well. So let's continue with the example here. And this is what it does when we run it. You can see it says we are on item, and then it says the item number. Is that what you were expecting it to do? That was directed at you, Trevor.
Oh, I didn't know. Sorry. What did you ask?
I said I was showing the demo here of the for loop actually in use. Did it do what you think it would have done by looking at the code there?
No.
No. Okay. What do you think it was going to do?
I have no idea.
Okay. Well, just to go back over this for people that are confused and Trevor, which Trevor is confused, or at least that's the impression I get. So what we're doing here with the for statement is we're just cycling through each item. So if you have a list of people's names, if you're cycling through it in the way Python is, you could almost think of this as you just looking across the page of those names and you're seeing one name at a time, right? So you're seeing Bob, then you're seeing Sally, etc. And so that's what is happening here. So we're seeing item is a variable, right? And this for statement. And item is set to each item one at a time that is in the particular iterator, which in our case is the list. An iterator in our case is just something we can iterate over, and our list is an example of this. And so we're just printing out each and every item here one at a time by setting item in this for statement to item, and then we're printing that for statement out. The for statement will then cycle back, print to the next item, and once it's done with the items, it will go to the next line in Python, and in that case, it's blank, and there's nothing else to run, and it will then exit the program. Does that make more sense to you now?
Yes.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. Okay, so, folks, believe it or not, that was my talk. So this is the part where I'm going to ask questions, and we can go back over and talk about other things in Python in general that we hadn't talked about, and Linux in general. So
this is not the best type of. This is not the best show for me to be in. I should have been in something gaming related or something would have been better.
Possibly. Maybe we can have you do a talk on Linux gaming in the future. That would be an interesting topic. So, but anyways, does anyone? I don't even know if there is anyone in the chat actually. But is there anybody in the chat that has any questions right now? I don't see anyone in the chat, so I'm guessing that means they don't have questions. Congratulations! That means everybody's smarter. Well, no, that probably just means people aren't paying attention to me that much. But regardless of what the reasons is, what we've been talking about, like I said, is just Python. We didn't talk about if statements today. So what is an if statement? Well, an if statement, quite simply, an if statement, what that is a way of handling a conditional. So let's talk about the while loops and how the conditionals work again. Because that will illustrate what I'm talking about quite well. So as you can see, the 0 = 0 thing there, folks, what that's all talking about, the 0 = 0, what that is when you have a condition, as we were talking about earlier. Now, an if statement is another way of checking a condition. So it would be written in Python as such: if condition, colon at the end, just kind of like the while loop there, and then you would indent your code under it, and that's what would run if that condition is met. So you could have an if statement, for example, that checks in that while loop with the numbers a while ago, if that number is equal to 5, right? And then it could do something special, like say, yay, my favorite number is 5, we were on 5, right? So you could do that. Or, for example, in cycling through the names of lists, I've done this many times in the for statements. If we go to the for statement slide again, the for statements, I use them in combination with if statements all the time, because you can go through the for statement and you can check in a list of items for one particular item. So I've done this before in the software I write that broadcasts alerts, for example, for checking if a particular alert is expired. We'll cycle through each alert's expiry time, and then we'll compare it. If the current expiry time is in the past, we know it's expired. So let's go ahead and remove that, right? That's how we're able to do that. And that's a combination, like I said, of using the for statements and the if statements together. So generally, you want to learn all these concepts and apply them together. So, using the variables, using the lists, using the for statements, the while loops, all these things are really going to help you. The other things that we can talk about too in Python, another big thing we can talk about in Python as well, which is really interesting, is the fact that it's interpreter based, and that means you can actually open an interpreter session and actually do that. So that's actually what I'm going to do right now, considering that we are a little bit quicker than I thought we would be on time, and that should be quite interesting. So everybody just stand by for just a second while I switch the view here. And we're going to go ahead and show the interpreter. So this right here is the interpreter. Or actually, this right here is my shell. I'm going to open the interpreter now, sorry. So there we go. Now we're in the Python 3 shell, and we can actually start writing out code like that in the shell. This is one of my favorite things about Python, because if you need to test something real quick, you don't have to write a full program to test it. You don't even have to write any program to test it as far as saving it as a file and running it. You can actually go in here and do this. So for example, if I wanted to import a library, the way you do it in Python is you type import. So we could go import, and then there's a library called OS. I can import OS. And then I could import the time library. I'm just showing how to import stuff, see? And now let's say I wanted to print two things and have a pause in between them. I could go thing. I can spell thing correctly, folks. Thing1, right? And then it prints thing1, see? And then I can go time.
Now it actually, a lot like basic.
Yeah, you can kind of think of it that way.
Except you don't say 10 print this, 20 print it, whatever, stuff like that. You don't need to number your inputs.
Yeah, you don't number your lines. But yeah. But it is similar to basic in some ways. I've actually heard several people say that before, so that's a quite common statement. But now we can go sleep for 2 seconds, and then you see, look there, it's waiting 2 seconds before it returns. So this is actually demoing the sleeping in the shell is not the best, because I can't write something under it at the same time as I do it. Well, actually, I take that back. I could write a function. So this is how you do functions. You go def, and then you type a function name. We're just going to call this test, because I want to try to do a better demo of this. And now I'm going to print something else. So we're going to do test, right? Oh, hold on. Thought it was auto-indenting it. Sorry, folks. Let's try that again. I don't use the shell very much. I needed to do that. See, now it's happy with me.
See, I don't know. This is pretty cool.
But... Thank you. So now I'm going to do a time sleep for 2 seconds. Now I'm going to come over here and do another print statement, and you're going to see what's going to happen is S2 is going to print 2 seconds after the other one. So now if I go out and I run test, which it's easy to call a function in Python, you just open and you do the function name, open and close parentheses if it has no inputs, no arguments. So now if I'm going to run this, you're going to see it print test, wait 2 seconds, and then print test2. Or not. This is called debugging live, by the way.
Fail.
Yeah. Here, let's try this a different way. Let's not do it in the shell. So let's just create a new file. I'm much more proficient at doing it this way. Import time. And then we're going to do, we don't actually have to do it inside of a function this time because it's going to do it line by line. And I can actually write things out ahead of time. So we're going to do time, hold on, time.sleep, 2 seconds. Then we're going to do print test2. Now, I'm going to call the Python interpreter. And look, we got test. It pauses for 2 seconds. Test2, and then it exits. See? So that's how you could do some timing in your Python code if you needed something to happen and then wait a certain amount of time before something else happens. That's how you can do that in Python. So that is quite useful. You kind of see the use cases for this stuff, Trevor?
Yeah, I do.
Good. Very good. I think I just noticed a little something here. I don't know. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, okay. I wasn't sure if your audio was going out. All right.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
All right, yeah. I wasn't sure. Yeah, that's something that we want to make sure that it's working.
You're gonna have to test it out.
Yeah, when I see you talk, I'm not saying the audio meters go up. I think those are just for me though. So I don't do Google Hangouts live, folks. That
Try
much.
to see you every time you talk. It comes up that you're talking.
Oh, okay.
Uh-oh.
Folks, we may be having one-way audio on Trevor. Hold on a minute. Let me just check something here before we go any farther. Let's see here. Okay, folks, I did just confirm that Trevor is on the audio feed. We're fine. Woo! That was close. Started to say that would have been really weird me just talking to myself this whole time, effectively. Okay, folks, so no, but lucky for you guys, Trevor does, I repeat, does exist.
No, I don't.
No, he doesn't.
I'm a bot. That can use cell phones, no problem.
Trevor
should I put in that it's also an Android phone, which is Linux based?
Yes, you should put that little detail in there. Yeah.
No iPhones for me.
Yeah, exactly.
And then there's 2 things right here. At least the top one, you can't see it, but that's also running Linux. So
nice. Yeah. So Trevor, actually, let's talk about that for a minute. So, why did you decide to use Android, considering this is a Linux-related topic, and I'm sure people will be interested?
Well, I've been using Android ever since Gingerbread.
So it's been quite a few years.
Before that, I was using BlackBerry, and I absolutely despise BlackBerry. And I absolutely despise iOS. So the next best thing was me to check out Android. At first, I didn't think I was going to like it, but I did love it, and I've been using it ever since.
Nice.
Like I said, I've been using it since Gingerbread, and of course, I've tried the older versions on like emulators and stuff. But
nice. Yeah, I have to say, Android is in my opinion a really wonderful OS. It is Linux based in a lot of ways. Well, it's using the Linux kernel. Depending on who you ask, that either is or isn't a Linux distro. I say it's a Linux distro because the Linux kernel's. I mean, that's what makes a Linux distro. Linux distro, you ask me, is the kernel, right? At the end of the day, that's what gives it its stability, its reliability. It's just the fact that it's Linux. But
unfortunately, on my computer, I'm not using Linux. I'm using good old Windows, as you can see.
Yep, you are using Windows.
Good old Windows.
Yep. So, folks. Linux. Yep. So, folks, if you want to be a guest speaker with me and talk, that would be the time to go to our website, vincentmager.com/the-internet-users-group. Yeah, I know.
Your website's down.
And yes, I know the website's down, Trevor. I was about to mention that to them. And yeah, the website's down right now. There's some issues with the servers that I'm going to have to look into immediately following this broadcast.
Hey guys, fun Vincent to get fiber optic internet so he can do his streams better.
Yeah, well, once we can, we'll definitely be getting fiber.
Maybe we should start up a Kickstarter. Get Vincent fiber optic internet.
That would be wonderful. Yes, let's start that. You can visit our Kickstarter page for that. No, I'm just kidding. No, but in all seriousness, we are going to be. We do want guest speakers every week. And so if you have an interesting topic you want to talk about that's Linux related, whether you're Trevor or not Trevor, you can feel free to go and submit a request to speak with us. And what's going to happen is we're going to have you fill out a simple form. We need a few pieces of information. One, we need you to be over the age of 18 because you're going to be in the broadcast. We don't want to deal with parental consent. Two, the other thing is we're going to need your name, obviously. We're going to need an email for contact, and we want one other form of contact. We'll take a phone number. We'll take a Discord account. I think we'll take a Skype account, and you have to have a Google Hangouts account as well, a Google account, which I think everybody does. Those are the things you have to have. And then finally, we want you to propose a talk to us, right? Propose what you're interested in talking to us about. And assuming all those things are interesting to us, aka the talk and everything else checks out, and we can contact you, one of our admins will reach out to you and say, hey, you said you'd like to submit a talk. What meeting would be good for you? We do our meetings every Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. That would be 3 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, and you can convert that to your appropriate time zone. We're also going to be putting the times for the meetings in UTC on the event calendar. So if you don't have happen to live in one of those time zones, you can convert based on the UTC time as well. But anyways, so that's when our meetings will be, like I said, is every Saturday. And we want guest speakers to come. Each meeting is going to last about an hour. Most guest speaker slots will last about 30 minutes. But I will say if we do have a very interesting talk, we could make it last as much as 45 minutes. And then at the beginning and the end of the meetings, we're going to introduce the guest speaker. So it'd be nice if you give us a little bio. And it's going to be quite interesting. And I should point out one other thing too. When you submit a talk, please keep your talk please keep your talk family friendly. Our user group, our meetings are open to anybody that wants to view the meeting. Yes, exactly. So we would ask no cussing, inappropriate content of any kind. This is the Linux users group. Let's keep it friendly so that anyone that wants to enjoy the amazing thing called Linux will be able to do so with us and not be offended.
And according to what Vincent has been telling me, we're going to be covering everything in terms of Linux. So.
We are? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, we are. So we're going to be talking about all kinds of stuff. I would like to do a talk in the future on the Raspberry Pi, and I think Trevor, he was talking about that he may do one as well on the Raspberry Pi. So we may end up doing that talk together. That could be interesting.
I may also do a talk on modding Xboxes.
Yeah,
Xbox
because
360s.
Yeah, and that's because the Xbox 360 mod that he's talking about is actually based on Linux kernel. So it's somewhat related to the Linux ecosystem. So you guys might find that interesting. But we're going to be doing topics that is specifically Linux related and then related to Linux in some fashion. So again, programming, different things like that. But submit a talk to us, like I said, and let us know if you'd like to speak. I think it pretty much goes without saying your video and audio will be out on YouTube. So if you're not comfortable speaking to an audience, then don't fill out the form because that's part of the process. I have a feeling we'll probably get somebody that will be like, I'd love to speak. And then we get them on the Google Hangouts. And they're like, no, I don't want to be on the air. And I'm like, well, that's what this is for. It's the Hangouts on air. So.
Or do what I do and just disable your camera and just use the mic.
I did see that. Yeah. Well, but your audio would still be out there. I mean.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I should point out, we'd prefer for people to come in via video, but, to do your demos. But, if you want to do a screen share for your demo of a presentation like I did, that's always optional. And so I think, folks, that, the thing to remember is when you're submitting a talk, make sure that it's going to be interesting. Try to keep it short and to the point, and try to make it towards general audiences. Like I said, I'm going to plan on doing some more programming talks. I've already done this one. You do want to keep it as non-technical as possible. I mean, we're going to get technical, but try to make it to where everyone that's going to be watching the broadcast will be able to understand what you're talking about. And as far as the audience goes, I'd like to at this time extend the invitation for you to always check us out on our website. And also, if you have a comment, go in the chat, and don't forget to provide that information in the chat.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
Yeah, and if you have any questions about Linux during the end of the meetings, if there's any questions in the chat, me and any of the guest speakers will try to answer your your questions. Another thing, if you want to guest speak with more than one person, that is fine. They will also need to have a Google Hangouts account, and we will need to vet them, ahead of time, just like we'll vet you. And by vet, I just mean make sure you're, who you say you are, that we can get in contact with you. Make sure your video works, that your talk will make sense for our audience, right? And that you're going to be family friendly. And assuming all those things check out, we'd be more than happy to put you on the air. And of course, that you're 18 or older. But assuming all those check boxes are checked, we'd be more than happy to have you guys. And so without further ado, I think that pretty much covers today's meeting. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out and watching today's meeting. Meetings are recorded, so if you cannot meet at the time of the meeting, unless you're a guest speaker, of course, then you could simply watch the recording at a later time. The Linux Users Group is just getting started, so go to our website, join, become a speaker, contribute to us. It's going to be quite interesting, some of the different things we're going to be able to do. And I hope that we can bring you along with this amazing journey. So, Trevor, is there any places on the internet that you'd like to promote that people can find you on the internet?
Subscribe to my YouTube channel, link in the description, Trevor Warren 452, and that's about it.
All right. You guys can check out my YouTube channel. It will also be in the description below, but it's youtube.com/VincentMaggard for those that are wondering. I also run a little alerting network called the Mallet Network. You can visit that webpage at weather.vincentmaggard.com. You can kind of think of us as the National Weather Service that relays the National Weather Service.
Or you can also check me out on Twitch at Trevor Warren 452.
Okay. Sounds good, Trevor. And so anyways, the Mallet Network, there we deal with a lot of weather data from the NWS, and then we republish that out for people to be able to get it, particularly weather alerts, because it is the Mallet Network. So feel free to check that out at weather.vincentmaggard.com. Thank you guys very much for watching today's meeting, and don't forget, use Linux. Have a great day, guys. I'm your host, Vincent, with guest speaker Trevor Warren. Talk to you guys next time. Yeah, talk to you guys next time.